Good afternoon and welcome to the Planning Committee here today at Mid Sussex District Council's offices. You've heard the safety announcement and thank you for everybody for coming out on such a foul day. My name is Councillor Gary Marsh. I am the chairman. To my left is my vice chairman, Councillor Kennedy. To my right is Steve Ashdown, who's the senior planning officer. To his right is Paula Slynn, who's our legal officer for today. To her right is Joseph Smith, who's going to be doing the first item on the agenda. And in the corners are the Democratic Services officers, and the committee are out in front of me. I'd just like to remind everybody that this is a meeting held in public, but it's not a public meeting. So if you may hear things you may not want to hear, and you may hear things you want to hear, please respect the opinions of the councillors when they make their statement, and we'll keep all cheering and clapping to a minimum, please. Thank you very much. So item 1 on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence, and we have none. Item 2 on the agenda is to receive declarations of interest from any member on the matter on the agenda, and I understand Councillor Cherry and Councillor DeBell. So yes. Could you just press your button, please? Thank you. The right-hand one. Oh.
Yes. Regarding item 6, I need to register a prejudicial interest in that particular item.
And will you be speaking as the ward councillor?
And I will be speaking as a ward councillor.
And for the members of the public who are watching on YouTube channel, Councillor Cherry will withdraw from this part of the forum and go to the back of the chamber and then come and speak as the ward councillor as and when the time. Councillor DeBell.
Thank you, Chairman. I need to declare that I'm a member of East Grinstead Town Council, but I am not predetermined. That's to do with item number 1, which is 9 Morton Road, but I am not predetermined and ready to consider the facts independently. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And nobody else? Right. Item 3 is to agree by general information the minutes of our meeting we had on the 5th of October. Is that okay and agreed? And I will sign it. Thank you. Item 4 is to consider any items that I agree to take as urgent business. I have none. So therefore we will go to item 5, which is DM 230929 9 Morton Road, East Grinstead. And Joe, this is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. We have a few updates on the update sheet that I will take members through. Para 3.1 recommendation A has been updated to include the Ashdown Forest contributions within the reason for recommended reason for approval. Paragraph 4.0, we've had 6 additional representation letters. They've raised additional concerns over impact on wildlife, protected species and badgers. The site not being large enough and overdevelopment, neighbouring amenity, highway safety, parking and not identified for development. Paragraph 5.0 is Natural England's comments, which have raised no objection, subject to securing appropriate mitigation. In paragraph 8.11 there's a correction. The planning reference should read DM 22/2087. On paragraph 10.5, there's a correction. The proposal will also shows 19 parking spaces and not 21 as stated in the report. On paragraph 12.43, details of a further walkover survey was carried out on the 31st of October 2023 by a qualified ecologist. The walkover survey found limited badger activity on site with no sets being recorded on the site. It provides a number of recommendations, recommended standard controls to minimise the disturbance and some recommended mitigation measures. In regards to Appendix A, the recommended conditions on page 31, Condition 4 has been amended. It is now a pre-commencement condition and reads, the development hereby permitted shall not commence unless and until a detailed ecology mitigation plan has been submitted and approved by the local planning authority. The plan shall include detailed mitigation and enhancement measures as outlined in the Ecology Report AA Environmental Limited, August 2023, and the letter AAE Environmental Consultant dated the 1st of November 2023, and informed by a further walkover ecological survey for protected species. This may include the appointment of an appropriate competent person, e.g. an ecological clerk of works, to provide on-site ecological expertise during construction. The appointed person shall undertake all activities and works shall be carried out in accordance with the approved details. And the reason is to conserve and enhance protected and priority species, and to allow the LPA to discharge its duties under the Conservation Habitats and Species Regulation 2017 as amended, the Wildlife and Country Act 1981 as amended in Section 40 of the NERC Act 2006, Priority Habitats and Species, and to comply with DP 38 of the Mid Sussex District Plan. The application seeks planning permission for the demolition of the existing dwelling and the erection of 4 pairs of semi-detached dwellings with car parking and modifications to the existing access and provisions of soft landscaping. The application site is shown here, outlined in red. It currently hosts a detached bungalow with associated outbuildings to the northwestern corner. It is surrounded on all sides by residential gardens, and it has a single access point to the south, which onto Morton Road. The site is designated within the Mid Sussex District Plan as being within the built-up area boundary of East Grinstead, and is also within 7 kilometres of the Ashdown Forest. The site has been subject to a number of recent applications and appeal, the first of which was TM 211780, and this was seeking consent for 2 detached dwellings and 3 pairs of semi-detached dwellings. So we had the 2 detached on the western side with the 3 pairs of semi-detached facing south towards the Morton Road. As we can see here, the dwellings were a mix of 3 and 2 stories. So obviously the detached property is identified on the left-hand side. So we have the front and rear elevations and an example of the side, which was there's a similar design for both of these 2 detached, which were 3-story. And obviously with the semi-detached, it was a mix of 2 and 3 stories. So obviously the ones with the hipped roof didn't have any space in the roof, but obviously still a similar height to the 3-story that was proposed. The dwellings were of a traditional style, and a few key points that we should pick up on from the appeal decision, which is a material consideration which should be taken into account, is the inspector found that due to the height and bulk, with the atypical features of the raised eaves height, the proposal was harmfully at odds with the scale and character of the surrounding dwellings. However, within that same report, it was considered that the semi-detached pairs would harmonise with the sitting of most nearby semi-detached in Morton Road, and as the pairs were separated from one another, they would respect the more spacious layout of paddock gardens. So that was in relation to these 3 pairs here. In addition, the inspector considered that the degree of mutual overlooking that would occur between the first floor windows of plots 2 and 3 and 4, and the main dwellings 15 and 16 Paddock Hall Gardens was reasonable, and due to the layout and orientation and the findings of the noise impact assessment, the inspector had no concerns in relation to daylight, sunlight and noise and disturbance. One of the key points the inspector raised was in relation to plots 1 and 2, because the 2 detached dwellings would be sited close to one another and to the site boundaries, that it would, with limited outdoor space for plot 2, it was considered that they would be unacceptably built up and squeezed in. While the appeal was pending consideration, a second application was submitted under DM 22-2087, which sought to address the previous reasons for refusal. The main changes is obviously in relation to the overall design and appearance. So we have a completely different design with the sort of eaves, dormers, trying to reduce the height of the buildings, and obviously a change in the materials as well. There was also, to point out, there was changes made here to plot 3, which was seeking to try and pull it further away from the northern boundary over concerns of neighbouring amenity issues raised in the reasons for refusal. However, as per the plans, it was not considered that these changes represented a high quality design that was in keeping with the character of the area. Concerns remained in relation to plots 1 and 2 being built up and squeezed in, and there was also reasons for refusal in regards to the Ashdown Forest and infrastructure contributions because the legal agreement was never completed. Which brings us on to the current application that we have before us now. As you will notice, the plots 3 has reverted back to the original relationship that it had with the northern boundary. One thing to note is the inspector did not have an issue with this relationship. Also, we still have the 3 pairs of semi-detached dwellings, which provide a similar spacing as the inspector found acceptable. Plots 1 and 2 is now semi-detached, which has been pulled further back from the boundaries, and it also now provides larger garden areas, in some cases larger than the gardens provided to plots 3 and 4. Each unit will have 2 parking spaces. It's been provided with bins, all have been provided with bin stores and cycle parking, and there is 3 visitor parking spaces provided. We have the floor plans here, so members can see the layout. Each unit will be identical with a open plan living dining room, separate kitchen and a downstairs bathroom, and then 3 bedrooms at first floor, 1 with an ensuite and then a separate family bathroom. We have the front and side elevations. As you can see, the design has reverted back to a more traditional style in line with the first application. The proposal has been reduced to is 2-storey with the rooms contained within the roof slope. And the rear and side elevations, just to give an idea, the rear elevation will have a similar relationship as previously considered acceptable by the inspector, especially to Paddock Gardens to the north. And we have a plan here showing the street scene and elevations, which highlights the space in between the properties. And we also have a section through the site here below. There's obviously a change in levels from Paddock Gardens down to Morton Road. And as you can see from the cross sections, because of the change in levels, the dwellings to the rear of Paddock Gardens will appear at a lower level. And it's not considered that the rearward development would be overly dominant. The following plan just has been submitted by the applicant. It just shows how a service vehicle can enter, turn and leave within the site. It is noted that within the West Sussex comments that the proposal is 2 parking spaces below their requirements. However, West Sussex are not objecting to the proposal. This has not been a previous reason for refusal, and it was not an issue raised by the planning inspectorate. And we have a comparison plan just to show you the difference between the 3 schemes. So obviously the scheme has been reduced to 2-storey. We've retained similar relationships from the rear of the properties with the same similar spacing as for these 3 semi-detached properties which the inspector considered acceptable. And we can see how the 2 units on this side have evolved with now being pulled even further back. If you can see the sort of red line of the outbuildings, you can see obviously the first scheme was right up to that line, second scheme was just off that line, and the third scheme we've got even further pulled back to the north and a setback as well from the south. And we have some photos of the scene. The first is looking west along Morton Road, with the second looking east at the front access point. This is where the proposal is seeking to gain access to the sites as the only access available. The next 2 photos, first one is looking north up the access road and looking south. And we have the first photo looking west, as you can see, the outbuildings in the corner, and we have the dwellings on Dunnings Road just beyond the hedgerow. The second photo is looking east, and we can see the existing bungalow in view and the boundary treatment to the rear of the properties on Morton Road. This is further along with the bungalow just on the left. And then the final photo here is of the boundary to the east. And the final 2 photos are just an example to show the northern boundary with paddock gardens and the boundary to the south with the rear of the gardens of Morton Road. The proposal will be providing an additional 7 residential dwellings within the built-up area boundary of East Grinstead within a sustainable location at a time where there is a need for local authorities to significantly boost the supply of housing. The proposal is considered acceptable in relation to design, size and scale within this locality, and the resulting relationships are not considered to cause significant harm to neighbouring amenity. The proposal also is considered acceptable in relation to drainage, ecology, highways and access, dwelling space standards, accessibility, sustainable construction, trees in the Ashdown Forest, and it will result in economic benefits in terms of additional employment during construction and additional local spending. And it is considered that the proposal would overcome the previous concerns raised by the inspector and the previous reasons for refusal. It is noted that the proposal will provide 2 fewer spaces than required by West Sussex Highways. However, this has not been a previous reason for refusal, and West Sussex Highways are not objecting to the proposal. The lack of the confirmation of a water connection and the noise and disturbance during constructions are not considered to be sufficient reasons to refuse a scheme. Therefore, in accordance with recommendation A, the application is recommended for approval, subject to completion of the legal agreement to secure infrastructure and Ashdown Forest contributions and the conditions set out in Appendix A. We have a recommendation B that if a satisfactory planning application has not been completed by the 2nd of Jan 2024, at the discretion of the Assistant Director for Planning and Sustainable Economy, it should be refused as the application fails to comply with policy DP20 of the Mid Sussex District Plan in respect of the infrastructure required to serve the development, and the proposal fails to mitigate its impacts on the Ashdown Forest Special Protection Area. Proposal would therefore conflict with policy DP17 of the Mid Sussex District Plan and policy EG16 of the East Grinstead Neighbourhood Plan. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joe. Comprehensive, as always. Thank you. We do have a number of speakers. When you come to speak, you'll be asked to come to where Terry, our Democratic Services Manager, is. It's Councillor Craig Pond. You will have 2 minutes to state your case. There will be a countdown on the screen and behind me and at the front. I shan't give you any notes other than the fact you've got 30 seconds to go Okay, so when you start speaking, the countdown counter will start to councillor.
Thank you and good afternoon, Chair and the rest of the fellow committee. Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm Craig Pond. I'm a member of East Grinstead Town Council and I'm Vice Chair of Planning. And I'm here to present the views of East Grinstead Town Council and its residents. As stated in the committee report, this site has been subject of numerous applications over the years, first dating back to 1974 and 75, where I think it's worth noting that an application for 2 detached single-storey bungalows was submitted and refused, 2 detached single-storey bungalows. And obviously for the more recent application, 4 pairs of semi-detached dwellings, which have also been refused. Now, East Grinstead Town Council acknowledge the need and recognise the value of good housing development in East Grinstead, where this is appropriate and adheres to the Mid Sussex District Council plan and neighbourhood plans. The East Grinstead Town Council Planning Committee of the 17th of April 2023 reviewed the recent application and the changes and continue to recommend refusal for this site. The reasons for that are as follows. The reduction in height from the previous application is minimal. This site has previously been determined as suitable for bungalow height. In addition to that, there have been a number of concerns previously raised that have not been allayed. Firstly, DP 26 of the district plan, character and design, and EG3 of the East Grinstead neighbourhood plan, we see this as having significant harm to the amenities and overdevelopment of the site. DG 41 addressing sloping sites, and DG 45, we see this as overbearing on privacy for those neighbours. And the committee would also ask that the comments that we made in relation to the previous application remain valid and have not been mitigated. These are around the car parking, of which I think we heard there's not enough car parking spaces, and the unneighbourliness of this.
Thank you. Can you conclude in 1 sentence, please?
So in summary, given the reasons just stated and due to the strong local opposition with over 50 letters of objection, we recommend refusal. This site is unnecessary, unwanted, and there is a current adequate...
That's a very long sentence, sorry.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Right, I'd like to call now Ellie Hazel. Is that did I pronounce that correctly? Oh, that's good then. When you start speaking, again, the clock will start to tick down.
I'm a resident of Morton Road speaking on behalf of 60 immediate local residents and backed by over 700 local petition signatories. We're not opposed to development. We're simply seeking a reasonable scale that would benefit the council and protect both the amenities of residents and biodiversity, including legally protected species. Previously green infrastructure allotments, this highly sensitive site has had 2 planning application refusals and an unsuccessful appeal, which have generated hundreds of representation letters citing critical concerns which have still not been addressed, despite us offering to engage with the developer. There are too many to fit within 2 minutes, but we wish to highlight Morton Road not featuring on any housing site allocations and Mid Sussex being able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply without the need for this overdevelopment. Contrary to policies DP26, policy EG3 and principle DG16, the design of the scheme is not appropriate in nature and scale, and it would cause significant harm in regards to overlooking loss of privacy and overbearing impact on the existing occupiers, and streets should not mix fronts and backs. 9 3-storey dwellings ignoring the topography was not an acceptable starting design, and reduction in height is immaterial if it is still too high, which it absolutely is. Contrary to your adopted policies DP 37 and 38, the applicant has not proved no net loss of biodiversity, and the applicant's ecological report was not standard practice, as they only surveyed built structures on site. We've seen and recorded badgers and bats leaving and entering the site, which officers and now the police have seen too. And despite discrepancies in the applicant's numbers, 46 trees are to be removed, with only 4 planted in amenity space. Any trees planted in private spaces cannot enforceably be managed, maintained, or retained. We have material concerns regarding insufficient parking, access, flooding and drainage, the inadequacy of information supporting the application, and the lack of regard for the residents' own information. I implore members to give our concerns real weight in your consideration and to please reject the application. Thank you.
I'd like to call now Tim Pope, who's again speaking against this application.
The proposal before you is like previous schemes, submitted without any community consultation or engagement by the developer, despite the advice of officers. The very reasoned, informed comments of people who live, walk, drive and park in the locality articulate legitimate material planning considerations demonstrating why the proposals amount to unacceptable overdevelopment, contrary to adopted policies intended to protect residential amenities and the natural environment. Any premise that the redevelopment of the whole site is acceptable in principle is, by MPPF definition, wrong. The biodiversity-rich garden is not previously developed or brownfield land preferred for development. Located between existing properties, the site coverage, density, scale and mass proposed is simply too much to accommodate without harm to residents and nature. There has been insufficient survey effort to determine no adverse impacts upon protected species or the no net loss and enhancement of biodiversity your adopted policy requires. Please be aware that the apparently benign comments of the Council's ecologist have been made without sight of residents' unambiguous evidence of bat and badger activity, the latter endorsed by the Badger Trust. Critically, there is no consideration of Natural England's standing advice in respect to badgers, a consideration that cannot be deferred but must be fully understood before making any decision. In my professional opinion, members do not have sufficient information on ecological impacts necessary to make a reasonable, robust judgment on the application, mindful of the Council's legal obligations to safeguard protected species. The proposals are not in accordance with the development plan, and unlike many, your Council is delivering on housing supply, meaning the tilted balance that might favour sustainable development, which this isn't, does not apply here. And the adverse impacts clearly outweigh the benefits of new housing. There are no other material considerations to weigh in favour of the proposals, and members are therefore respectfully requested to refuse the application.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a planning consultant speaking on behalf of the applicant. We have before you an application for a development of 8 family-sized 3-bed houses that will contribute to meeting local housing need. They comply with national space standards and they'll be particularly suited to providing good quality family accommodation with private gardens, cycle parking, car parking and servicing facilities appropriate to the size of the development. Both the planning inspectorate and your professional planning officers have confirmed that this site is appropriate for residential development. The main issues of concern previously were with regard to the height and the design of the buildings. We've considerably changed that and reduced the overall height to ensure that there's no undue overbearing impact on neighbours. Greater separation distance has been created to neighbouring houses to ensure no undue loss of privacy or amenity through overlooking, and the landscaping throughout the site will further integrate the development into its surroundings. We have a traditional design that fits in comfortably with the surrounding area. Parking is appropriate. We've demonstrated that there will be no adverse noise impact arising from the use of the access. Whilst not of concern to the planning inspectorate, the council requested a preliminary ecological assessment to ascertain whether development would impact on protected habitats or wildlife. That assessment was carried out in the summer and it concludes that there are no protected habitats and there is no evidence of protected wildlife present on the site. Furthermore, in the light of the representations recently made, the applicant's ecology consultant has again this week visited the site and has confirmed that the development will not impact on local wildlife or biodiversity. And of course, appropriate conditions, as indicated in the addendum on the planning permission, will ensure that this is the case. The site is sustainably located and as recommended by your officers, the development complies with local land plan policies and satisfies the aims and objectives of the development plan.
Thank you. I'm now going to call Councillor Adam Peacock. He's a member of this council. Normally, he would be given unlimited time, but he is aware not to try the patience of the chairman and will be succinct in his his speaking. Councillor Peacock.
Good afternoon, Chairman and fellow councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this application, which I respectfully ask you to refuse. Why? This is the third application submitted by the applicant over recent years, with the previous two having been refused by MSDC and the first refused by an Inspector of Appeal. The two previous applications, for 9 and then 8 dwellings, were refused for their scale and design, the scale, which were considered not to reflect the immediate area, i.e. Paddock Gardens and Morton Road. And I quote the previous decision, DM 22/2087 by the District Council, forming an unacceptable build-up and squeezed-in form of development, and that's for 9 and 8 dwellings, the same number we're considering here, and were judged to conflict with policies DP26 and EG3. Studying the latest application against the two previous refusals, minimum changes have been made to the scale of the proposed dwellings. The widths of the front and rear elevations remain larger than the existing semi-detached dwellings in Morton Road. The depth of the dwellings appear unchanged, and whilst the height of the proposed buildings has been slightly reduced to 6.5 from 6.7 metres, they continue to be significantly higher than the bungalows in Paddock Gardens. In combination of the above factors, I submit the proposed application is still out of keeping with the area, at variance with policies DP26 and EG3, and should be refused. Furthermore, MSDC has a 5-year land supply which was recently vigorously tested and validated at appeal and does not require this application to be approved. I therefore respectfully ask you to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. Not too long. Thank you. Now, before we go to debate, I'm going to ask the planning officer, because much has been said about the badgers and other protected species on this site. So, Joe, would you like to say a few words, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to highlight to members that we have had a number of representations about protected species, including badgers on this site. As sort of highlighted within the update sheet, the ecologists for the applicant have done a further walkover survey. They have found some limited activity of badgers on the site, but they have not identified a set on the site. So in consultation with our ecology consultant, we have discussed this, and that's why we've amended the condition 4, which would require not only the proposal to be carried out in accordance with the submitted ecology reports, but as badgers can sort of migrate, they can sort of move around a bit as a species. There is also a further walkover survey required as a pre-commencement so that they can do a further sort of assessment over the site to ensure that the species are protected, and then for it to be carried out in accordance with the mitigation recommended from there, which they'll have to be submitted and approved. So we have sort of looked at this additional sort of highlighted badger issue, and as I said, in accordance with our ecology consultant, we think that this condition is suitable to address that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Joseph. Right, members, before we go to the debate, much has been said. Can I caution every member not to try and introduce anything new for reasons to refuse, because we can't, and it would be seen to be unreasonable if we were to do that. So the whole basis of today is, with the latest refusal that Mid Sussex District Council gave, you've got to determine yourselves whether the application overcomes the reasons that the planning inspector said by plots 2. Does it, you can read it on page 10, does it overcome the reasons that the inspector dismissed the appeal, i.e. does it reduce the size, bulk, and that's the only real reason you can introduced, whether it does or it doesn't. So I'm going to go to Councillor Sweatman first, because he is the ward councillor as well. So Councillor Sweatman, by reason, you are the ward councillor, you get the go first. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Chairman. And thank you to our speakers this afternoon. I think they made some very good, valid points, which really, quite frankly, doesn't leave me much to say, really. But what I will reiterate is that on the previous inspector's report, he does say that the proposal would be harmfully at odds with the scale and character of the surrounding dwellings. I don't think that has changed. The actual roof height has only been reduced by 20 centimetres. That is, it's still an overbearing application on the residents of Paddock Gardens. So I can't really see what has changed on that one. I would also like to ask case officer about the materials that are being used on this. It does seem, if we could put up the photographs again, show the materials, Joe. When I looked at that on the planning portal or my one, they did seem a bit lighter than that. I'm just, even so, looking at that now, it doesn't seem to be in keeping with the 1930s, I think it's probably about the year, Morton Road, that type of building, and certainly Paddock Gardens as well. So I don't know whether a condition could be put in to look at that colour of the materials.
I was just saying to the officer, the difference with that screen is lighter than the difference of that screen, which is darker.
Notice that one. Now, if that's true, those materials is very reminiscent of the blot on the landscape at Hill Place Farm. I think if that was put on Morton Road, it'd be like a mini blot, okay, which is totally out of keeping with the surrounding areas.
Okay, I think you're right. I think, Joe, would it be unreasonable to a condition put in that should this go through, and it is recommended to go through, that a condition is put in place for the materials?
Yeah, so it's the officer's view that the materials are acceptable, but obviously if members are not happy with the proposed materials, we could amend condition 3, requiring the details to be submitted and approved, so we could get a different palette of materials. If the brick isn't acceptable, we can look at changing that with the condition 3. It's not.
Would that be acceptable, Councillor Sweatman?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. So basically, obviously I'd like to hear what other members have to say. Like I say, I'll reiterate that we've had some very good comments from our speakers this afternoon. It's still an overbearing impact to the surrounding area. I think it's overdevelopment. There's probably one too many in there. But I'll leave it at that and hear what other members got to say before I come back, if I may, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor DeVoe, another East member.
Thank you very much indeed. I must admit, I came along determined to look at all the evidence, and I know that the work that the officers, particular officers, had to do on this one, bearing in mind these plans going back a number of years. I commend him for what he's had to do on all of this. Done a great job, but looking at it, I can't help feeling, as I think Councillor Sweatman's alluded to, it looks like a quart in a pint pot, and I'm not entirely convinced, even with the. We have to accept what West Sussex say, particularly as I'm anyway. We have to accept what they say about the decision regarding getting into the site by fire engines, tipper trucks, and ambulances, etc. But it does look rather tight to me, and the whole thing, as I think Councillor Sweatman's alluded to, it does look well out of keeping. My thoughts, and I'm not a developer, but having looked at this, I must admit I'm encouraged by my own abilities. It looks to me as though it would be far better suited, as I think somebody writing in has said, to a smaller number of bungalows. We need desperately more bungalows in this country as people go up and down with them and all over the place. So I personally am convinced by the arguments that I've heard from very capable people today speaking against this particular development. And I'm sorry to say that, that as far as the officers are concerned, I think that the developer needs to be told to look again. So I should be voting against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeBell. You nicked my thing about quarter to a pint pot. Well, we know you can get a car down there because there's a bungalow at the other end of it. A lorry? Councillor Henwood.
Officer, could you go back to the picture showing a diagram of the houses? And I'd like to look at yes, now, could you show me the height? There's a slope, so where is the highest point and where's the lowest point in this proposal, in this application?
Cross-section. You want cross-section, Joe, I think? Yeah. My Vice Chairman didn't say it.
Okay, so that's where plot 1 and 2 is going to be.
So this is
Is that right?
This is Paddock Gardens. This is a section.
Oh, that's Paddock Gardens.
Through the site.
Okay.
And then obviously the land slopes down from Paddock Gardens across.
Oh, okay.
And it's lower at Morton Road.
Morton Road, okay. And that is an illustrative picture of the two-story proposal.
It's a street scene.
No, the one just in the diagram, that's the proposal.
Yeah, so we can,
Okay.
in terms of the height, the original DM 211780 scheme, the height that was proposed was 9.2 metres with the three-storey dwellings. With the DM 222087, we can see actually the blue line, the blue dotted line on here shows the DM 222087 height. It's fairly similar to the current proposal, but in terms of the actual DM 222087 reason for refusal, we didn't refuse it on a ground of the height of the building. It was so that wasn't a previous reason for refusal.
So the implication is that a two-story, that the privacy of the gardens in Paddock will be exposed. The privacy will be it will be detrimental to their privacy when there's a two-story semi-detached.
The inspectorate considered that the actual amenity relationship, when it was three-storey, was acceptable, especially from the properties, so plot 2, 3 and 4, as highlighted. So it is paragraph 12.21. The inspector considered that subject to suitable conditions, the proposal would otherwise be acceptable and would not harm living conditions of the occupiers of 15 and 16 Paddock Gardens and between plots 2 and 3 regarding overlooking and privacy. So that was when it was a three-storey dwelling. We've now got a similar relationship, but they've reduced it to a two-storey. So it's the officer's recommendation that it wouldn't cause an impact on neighbouring amenity.
So, Chairman, can you sort of guide, you said we can't put in any, if we were to refuse, we can't put any other reasons. Could you please guide us and tell me which reasons it was refused previously? What policies?
Yeah, you can't add any additional reasons. So I'm going to ask Mr. Ashdown to give the reasons why you can't, because we will be seen to be unreasonable.
No, I understand that, but what did we oppose it previously?
It's on page 10.
Okay, you wouldn't like to just read it out to me, would you?
811, and I'll get Mr. Ashdown to read it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So, yeah, it's on paragraph 811 on page 10 that sets out the reason for refusal for DM 230925. So that's what you really need to judge this application. Sorry, yes, DM, I haven't updated my own file. DM 222087. So there was one reason for refusal, one main reason for refusal in terms of the actual, in terms of the scheme itself, and that's broken down into two parts, for want of a better word. So the first bit relates to the design of the proposed dwelling, which we said was very contrived, with crown pitch roofs that were squat and not considered to represent a high quality design. And we had issues with the pallet materials. So that's one aspect in terms of the design and appearance of the buildings. The second point was that the reduction to the space in between the properties and the limited outdoor space provided to plot 2, so we're talking about plot 2, does not reflect the more spacious nature of paddock gardens and results in an unacceptable built-up and squeezed in formal development. So what we were talking about there is basically plot 2 itself. That was our objection. It wasn't the objection to the total number of houses on the site. It was in respect of plot 2. So what you need to judge is whether A, the overall design of all the buildings on the site is now an appropriate design in terms of its appearance. As Joe's highlighted, in terms of the height of the buildings, the original appeal decisions for the 3-storey buildings are at 9.2 metres. So our refusal, our last refusal, the buildings were at 6.8, 6.7. So that was considered acceptable because it wasn't a reason for refusal. So that's what you need to focus on, is what's in paragraph 8.11. They're the only matters that you can look at and judge whether this application has now addressed those matters. All other issues, because of the previous decisions, have been considered acceptable. There's been no changes in planning policy that would warrant you to take a different decision that could be considered reasonable should it end up at an appeal. So I just hope that clarifies in terms of the points to consider in the debate.
Thank you. You okay with that, Councillor Henwood?
Yes, I am.
Could you press your button? Thank you.
Looking at 8.11, it does refer that it contradicts our policies, EG 3 and DG 38 and 39. So that's still appropriate.
It conflicts mainly with DP 26 and policy EG3 of East Grinstead neighbourhood plan and the principles of DP TG 38, that's the design guide, of 38 and 39. So the main policy that the previous application went against was DP 26.
Oh, 26, okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Can you switch off now? Thanks. Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll just follow on with that thinking as well. And I'm just looking myself at DP 26. It must be of high quality design, layout, and includes appropriate landscaping and green space. And optimises the potential of the site to accommodate development. So what Mr. Ashdown has just clarified for me is that it's all about plot 2. But I see, my preparation for this meeting, I was probably looking at it wrongly, because I was looking at 8 dwellings which were in the previous application, and now there are eight dwellings, and from my view, they are a better design, but it's still awfully cramped in terms of, appropriate landscaping and green space. There isn't any. And so I say to myself, and my question now is, if that plot 2 was not there, for instance, if there was one less house, because I think I'm right in saying plot 1 and 2 are the ones on the left when we go in. You know, would that be, you know, is that a reason for considering, you know, going one way or the other, really? You know, you drive in there, I mean, you're going to find it pretty claustrophobic, really, you know, and the residents. And there's another thing, of course, all these houses have got north-facing gardens, and they're quite small gardens. So that's not very attractive, but I don't know that you can get around that. Well, I don't know, I'm not an architect. So that's my question, really. If the semi-detached ones on the left were just a single house, would that, well, I know that we have to decide on what's in front of us. So you're going to tell me that.
I wasn't.
All right, I've said enough. Thank you.
Okay. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's the 3 pairs of semis in a straight line has been proven to be acceptable to the planning inspector. And so therefore, unfortunately, try as we might, we've got to accept those 3 because they overrule us, as we know frequently. It's the plot 2. Plot 2 is the issue. Have they overcome the reasons that the officers, this was a delegated refusal? It was a delegated refusal. It didn't come in front of the committee. So it was delegated refusal because the officers had real concerns over plot 2. And the whole gambit here is, have they overcome that reason for plot 2? And you've got to decide whether you feel they have or they haven't. I have no other speakers. Councillor Sweatman. Oh, God, my vice chairman. Oh. He's already spoken. You can go first.
Just a couple of, a series of questions. In the submission from East Grinstead Town Council and Councillor Pond, now, that can't be right. Is that right?
So that relates to the historic appeals on the site.
Yeah.
So that was what, if you look at the planning history.
Yes, it does.
So that I think they considered at that stage that it was only suitable for bungalows. Obviously, we have a different plan in place, and we have the more recent appeal decision where the inspectorate didn't make any reference to it only being suitable for bungalows.
So that's wrong, basically.
Well, that was at the time.
That was at the time.
But
well,
obviously things have changed and moved on.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. You showed a slide of the 3 detached houses facing us and the semi-detached houses facing us, and the one on the left, which I think is plot 1 and plot 2, with a side view. That's the one. Is that to scale? The top, the photograph or the painting or whatever it is at the top?
That's a street scene, so it's
is it to scale?
It's a scale.
It is to scale.
Plan.
Okay, thank you. Now, I think we have to be and accept that those 3 semi-detached pairs of semi-detached houses facing us are okay. I mean, that's what we've effectively been told. But for me, the question is the condition for refusal, or the reason for refusal, set out in 811 by the planning inspector last time this was application 2087. I mean, there were reasons given for not high quality design, palette of materials wasn't right, not traditional materials. But I mean, that application was for the photograph that we saw of basically yellow brick buildings, wasn't it? That's the one in the middle. So, I mean, that was objected to on that basis. Okay? So we come on to the second point, which is the reduction to the spacing between the properties and the limited outdoor space provided to plot 2 does not reflect the more spacious nature of Paddock Gardens and results in an unacceptably built-up and squeezed-in form of development. Now, as the recommendation is to accept this proposal, can you tell me why you think that has been dealt with in this current application?
So as we can see from the plans, so the last application, I think quite a good, if you can just see, oh, sorry.
That works.
Sorry.
Talk amongst yourselves. Back again. Wrong one.
Effectively, what I'm saying is, why is it that the space in the application that was 222087, what is the difference in the current application, 230925? Because they look very, very similar to me.
Yeah, so if you can see the red line, the dotted red line here, on this.
Let me turn around, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see it on here. Obviously, it gives an indication where the outbuildings are. So they've sought to pull it further back from the northern boundary for plot 2. And they're now seeking to provide a larger garden space. And considering we're accepting the size of the plots for sort of 3 and 4, this garden area now associated with plot 2 is actually exceeds the garden space for plots 3 and 4. So in terms of sort of the actual sort of space around the building, it is actually exceeds what we considered acceptable for the properties next to it. So it has been pulled back from the boundary and is providing more of a garden space for the unit, and that's why it's considered acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, I see your point. Are you able to say what the difference is in terms of square metres or yard? Because this is a pretty key point, looking at the reason for refusal last time and how it's been overcome.
It is highlighted in 10.2. So each house would have a minimum garden area of 96.6 square metres, that's plot 3, and it does go to a maximum of 151 square metres for plot 8.
Plot 2,
yeah.
trying to find that.
I've found it.
Oh, you
Sorry,
found it? Oh,
yeah, sorry,
brilliant,
just
okay.
got a few to go through on the file. So the garden area for plot 2 would be 149 metres squared.
Okay, thank you. I can see too that in the new application, if I can pull up the current application that we're dealing with today, the building in plot 2 is actually further away from the boundary and further away from the property adjacent to it on Paddock Gardens than it would have been in the previous application. So that probably explains why the garden is bigger. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, before I go to Councillor Hitchcock, I just want a quick observation myself. And the reason why I feel it looks so cramped now is if you look at the 3 pairs of semi-detached on the current application we're looking at now to what you refused, 2087, those 3 pairs of semis have been pulled away from the boundary from the eastern and been moved to the western side to create a bigger garden for the plot, whatever that is down the other end, number 8, is it? Because if you look at the entrance going into the site, the turning circle or the turning bit has shrunk. The width of the road is shrunk. So that's how they've managed to, I think how it looks like it's been managed to be moved around, because it does look like they've squeezed the buildings together a bit to create a bigger garden. In fact, by doing that, I think they probably made the situation worse. So could you expand the last, if members could see what I'm talking about, if you look at 222087 and look at the grass area around it, like the green area, and then look at the 25 one, which we're doing now, it has definitely, the whole 3 have moved towards the west, shrinking the road internally. Thus, that gives that a more cramped look to it. Now, obviously, that is not a reason we can refuse it on, because we can only really refuse it on 2. I think they've made it worse. But, I'm only the chairman and I only have 1 vote. So, Councillor Hitchcock, you've been waiting, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I went to the site last Tuesday twice. I went once at midday, just gone midday, so I could see the thing in the daylight. And I went at 7 o'clock that evening to see what the parking was like on the adjacent roads. Okay. I managed to get to the end of the drive. There was a car park there, but I was just a nosy parker and I sort of stepped in. There are an awful lot of trees on the site, and I understand that the site is going to be cleared and replanted. I don't understand why as a professional architect. I'm quite happy with the road. I think the service vehicle can get in and out. I don't think that's an issue. It looks tight, but it's not. My own opinion is that the site is too dense. I don't know what the density is. Perhaps the officer can tell me what the site density is and where that sits within what we would consider to be a reasonable density.
Have you got the per hectare, what it would normally be?
An acre.
Even though it's nowhere near a hectare?
It's about an acre, isn't it, the site?
Probably less.
Yeah.
Less than that, I would have thought.
I don't have the hectareage on the top of my head, but one of the things to highlight is that within the appeal decision that we had originally, the inspectorate said that the proposal would be less than the 30 dwellings per hectare as required by EG7, but he did not raise that as an issue to raise, so it was considered acceptable.
Okay. I also looked at the slope of the site, and I wondered why the developer has not used the slope to actually give an impression of the buildings being lower. I also looked at the parking on the site, and I think it is realistic at the number. And going back at 7 o'clock in the evening, I found sufficient space to park myself and probably about another 5 or 6 vehicles. So I have no problem with that. They're laughing from the gallery. I understand why, but I did. The key issue on this is what the inspector said at the last appeal. The inspector gave a very clear guide, in my view, as to what was required to make this site acceptable. And it would appear to me that this application has come pretty close to complying with that. And I think that's the big problem. That's what we've got to decide on, not whether it's too dense. That decision's already been made elsewhere. So I reluctantly are probably going to have to support this, despite my feelings of it being too dense. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, a few quick words also in support. So I think that the changes have addressed the key issues that were raised by the inspector. And I think that when I looked at the site, and when I look at those diagrams, what you see is how much space there is around in all the existing dwellings. The actual space around the new dwellings is not that dissimilar to many of the new estates that we're building all over Mid Sussex. They are reasonable, provisions. So I can't see any strong reasons to object, and we do need the housing. That's it.
Mr. Ashdown, just to basically slap me a little bit about the distances that on the face of it, look smaller, but
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've just looked at called up a plan from the refuse scheme, which helpfully shows the distances between the various plots as per, and a similar plan for the current scheme. So the distances between plots 3 and 4, 5 and 6 and 7, 8, so the run of pair of semis, on the 22 refusal, it was 7.8 metres flank to flank between the plots, whereas on the current proposal, it's 8.4 metres. So the distances between the properties on the run of 3 semis is actually increased over what we refused in under the 22 application. Just to clarify that point, Chairman.
looking at it, I think slightly smaller as well. I think the buildings are definitely slightly smaller. Councillor Sweatman, wish to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Steve, you're saying that we can only look at design and appearance, for if we wanted to refuse it. Well,
and the other part of it.
Yeah. Well, I still think the appearance of this proposed development doesn't sit well within the existing houses or properties there. It's out of character as far as I'm concerned. I know we're not meant to, can't really refuse it on the ridge height, which I think is still far too tall. They've only reduced it by 20 centimetres, which is not very much, but I don't think from what you say we can actually look at that. But as regards to appearance, and also mentioned design about materials, the roofing colour of the materials. So I still say that the appearance doesn't sit well within that, and the whole design of the development doesn't sit well within the surrounding area. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, well, we can condition the materials. I'll just read the relevant part. The reduction into the space in between the properties and the limited out, this is the reason to refuse last time. reduction to the space in between the properties, the limited outdoor space provided to plot 2, well, you know that's been increased, and does not reflect the more spacious nature of paddock gardens and results in unacceptable built-up and squeezed in the form of development. The proposal therefore conflicts to policy, the rest of it. So we've heard that there are bigger spaces between the buildings, though it doesn't look like it. It looks like it's probably more complicated, but we've just heard that they are wide, more space, and it's got a bigger garden in plot 2. So as Councillor Hitchcock said, is it perfect? No. Have they addressed the reasons to refuse? Nearly. So, Councillor Henwood, do you wish to say anything else?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I myself still believe it contradicts DP 26. It's not suitable to the surrounding area. DP 26 creates a sense of place while addressing the character and scale of the surrounding buildings and landscape. And I think it contradicts this. I don't believe it is compatible with the surrounding buildings, the surrounding landscape. And it also, East Grinstead Neighbourhood Plan 3 says it should be proportional to the surrounding area, scale and height. And I think, am I correct in thinking the inspector previously said, okay, the 3 may be semi-detached, but not
He was unhappy with the other 2.
I would like to propose, personally, I would like to refuse this application on the basis of, we're talking about contrary to DP 26, policy EG 3 of East Grinstead. We've said principles DG 38 and 39, so.
That's of the design guide.
Yeah.
Okay, have you got a seconder? Councillor Cherry? Based on the DP 26, it hasn't yeah, go on.
You know, in terms of saying it doesn't comply with DP 26, you need to be very clear what aspects of the development do not comply with DP 26. And you need to bear in mind the previous reason for refusal. And obviously in the screen behind us, you can see in terms of the design and appearance, the middle buff one was the previous refusal, which was quite clearly unacceptable in terms of design in every way, shape or form. While the one on the right-hand side of the screen is the current proposal. And I'm struggling to see how that could be viewed as, from a design point of view, in terms of design and appearance, be unacceptable, given, yes, it is very similar to what we see developed up and down the district. And, you know, looking at the surrounding area, to me, that does not look out of keep, you know, out of character to what you would find in East Grinstead or any surrounding built-up area within the district. So you need to be very, very clear what aspects fail to comply with policy before I think we take a vote in Chairman.
Yeah. So you're saying that you feel that it hasn't overcome DP 26, and as Mr. Ashdown has just quite rightly said, what does it not do? Does it, the space between the properties are definitely greater, so that you can't use that. There is limited outdoor space. Well, we've seen that there is more outdoor space refer to plot 2, so we can't use that. Does not reflect the more spacious nature of paddock gardens. Yeah, I'll give you that one. And the results in unaccepted built-up and squeezed in the form of development that therefore the proposed. So are you saying that it does not reflect the spacious nature of paddock gardens, because it certainly is the same in Morton Road, but it's the paddock gardens, the northern boundary. And do you feel that it results in unacceptable built-up and squeezed in the form of development by having 8 units on there? Does it give you that appearance? Trouble is that site plan does look more complicated than the one which was refused. But as Mr. Ashdown quite rightly said, they are actually wider apart. But are they wide enough apart?
I'm looking at it, if it's compatible to the surrounding space.
What, the surrounding area?
Well, your surrounding area, the scale. It just seems like, sort of squeezed in, and, I mean, yeah, that's my opinion anyway, Chairman. I'll leave you to sort of define carefully what we need to. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to take advice a second before we go any. Councillor de Bell.
Mr. Chairman, I just ask for clarity here. This has occurred before, as you know. Are we actually saying that to actually declare a motion on this, we need to be clear what the motion is?
Yes.
And therefore, so that we can support or not support it, rather than just voting for or against the existing motion. If we vote against the existing motion, that's the end of it. But if we actually declare a motion, that has to have a rationale behind it.
We do, and that's what I was going to take clarity about, because we do. You need to know what, if there's a motion being put forward by Councillor Henwood. You need to know what you're actually voting to support or against the motion.
As I say, we've had this before, haven't we?
We have had this before.
Yeah.
I'm just going to switch off a second and talk to my better
understand.
brains than me.
I think that's where clarity would help.
Yeah. Okay, the advice I've just been given, we need to know exactly what your motion is, so how it affects plot 2, and then we'll take a very short adjournment outside the room, not you, myself, my vice chairman, the officers and the legal, to see if we can do it. We have done it in the past. We have gone out. Actually, I think we did it on in Crawley Down, if I remember right. So we'll need to know exactly what your motion is, and do you have a seconder, which I think Councillor Cherry put her hand up, yeah. So we've got a proposer and a seconder. I need to know what your motion is, and we'll go to a vote on your motion. And no, your motion first, and then we'll disappear. Then,
Excuse me, Chairman, can we reference to a specific, like plot 2? Can we reference, because that seems to be the problem, that plot 2 lends this a squeezed and overdevelopment site. That's what I would.
okay, well, plot 2 is referred into the reasons for refusal, so that's what your basis to start on.
Okay, we can start with plot 2.
Yeah. So.
Okay, well, at one point, it creates a very squeezed overdevelopment of the site. Chairman, I will expect you to refine this because you are the experienced chairman, okay?
I am, but I'm not the one putting the motion forward.
Okay.
But, so I gave you a bit of a hint. The first 2 bits, space in between the properties, you can't use.
Okay.
And you can't use the limited outdoor space, because that's been provided that it does actually have, plot 2 does have more outdoor space. What you've got to come up with, does the 8 units, including plot 2, reflect on a more spacious nature or not? So you've got to say it doesn't, it's in the negative.
Plot 2 does not reflect a more spacious development, more spacious appearance, which is contradictory actually to the surrounding environment.
So it basically adds to the problem.
Okay,
you're
that adds to the
basically
problem.
saying.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got that. Are you happy to second that, Councillor Cherry? Yes, I am. Okay, we're going to take a quick adjournment outside while I, shouldn't do it too soon, while I speak to the 2 officers and my legal and my vice chairman will disappear just out there for a few seconds, well, minutes or so.
of plot 2 and the fact that it doesn't provide sufficient outdoor space. So therefore, it doesn't reflect the more spacious nature of paddock gardens, because that is what the previous reason for refusal related to, which was the size of the garden of plot 2 and the impact that would have in terms of the spacious nature. And all I would draw your attention to is the fact that obviously the garden for plot 2 has got bigger. So it is more spacious and actually more akin and even bigger than some of the ones that have already deemed acceptable. So in terms of the motion, you know, or sorry, the proposal, Chairman, that would be my comment in that.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to remind members that, and this is the first time I've said this in nearly 5 years as chairman of this committee, remember, if we are seen to be unreasonable, I've got to use the costs argument, that if we are seen to be unreasonable, this council could be responsible for costs of the out of an appeal, which we, and I'm not saying I'm going to try and put you off, but it is taxpayers' money. So it's up to you. Do you wish to proceed with your proposal, Councillor Henwood? Bearing in mind, I'm not the professional. The guy to my right is the professional. I know where you're coming from,
No,
but
I
that's
do
not the
have a
reasons
question.
for a refusal.
Sorry, Chairman, I do have another question. I was not aware that previous inspector had commented on plot 2 and said that it was not acceptable because the outdoor space was not sufficient. I was not aware that that was an inspector's response from a previous where they had plot 2. That was, is that correct, Mr. Ashdown? That was the inspector's response.
So in relation to plot 2, so let's be clear, in terms of DM 22-2087, that's the council's decision done under officers' delegated powers. So that is the reason for refusal that you're looking at in terms of paragraph 8.11. So that's not a planning inspector. That is the council's decision in respect of that application.
Thank you.
And obviously the context of that decision was the previous appeal decision by the inspector.
Yes, I understand. Okay, so it was, yeah, thank you, it was the planning officers.
Joe took the decision in light of, in paragraph 810, AP 220017, which went to appeal and the appeal was dismissed. So armed with that knowledge, Joe made the decision with officers, with other officers.
Okay.
Well, and with the ward councillors, that's what you see in front of you is that we're debating now, 811. So in light of what you've just heard, do you wish to continue with your proposal for refusal?
I have another question.
On them.
So it was not an inspector who gave an opinion about the size of the garden of plot 2?
It's not an opinion, it's a professional opinion.
Okay, didn't go as far as the inspector. Okay,
He took it on board from what the...
I understand, yeah, from
Yeah.
previous reflection. Well, I think I still feel that I would like to put forward the motion, Chairman.
Okay, and you continue, you happy to support it? Okay, we have a reason for refusal, which you've just heard. So all those members who support the reasons for refusal, can you indicate in the normal way? Green if you agree with the reasons for refusal, red if you don't agree with the reasons for refusal, and or yellow is the abstention. Okay, I think I've got the full lot here. That reason for refusal has fallen by 9-3. So we now go to the officer's recommendation, which you, could we put the recommendation up on the screen, please? I need a proposer for the reasons you can see in front of you. So can somebody propose the support the reasons to approve? Councillor Kenny and Councillor Hitchcock. Can you now vote that you green if you agree with the officer's recommendation, red if you don't, and yellow if you want to abstain? Okay, I've got the full the results in. 9 support the officer's recommendation, 3 refuse the officer's recommendation to refuse. So this application has been approved. I'm sorry you didn't hear it, but you could safely hear we did give it a very good debate. Okay, thank you. So, going to stay, are you? Councillor Pond. Councillor Pond, you did intimate you would like to stay. You can stay in your seat. You don't have to, I won't make you climb the stairs. Okay. Right. Item 6 on the agenda is DM 230941, Phase 2E, Kema Tile Works, Kilnwood Avenue, Burgess Hill. And Mr. Ashdown, this is yours.
It is, thank you, Chairman. I'll just draw members' attention to the update sheet. Quite an important word was missed in para 2.2. Apologies for that. Obviously a slight amendment to recommendation A, and in terms of just clarity in terms of the local community infrastructure contribution fee. So in terms of the application, the site is located in the local centre of the Kingswood development. It's the red line here. It's currently vacant, has been used as a contractor's compound during the construction of the wider site. On the northern side of the square, so here, is a 3-storey mixed-use building which has a carpet ground floor and residential above. To the east side here is Priory Court, which is a 3-storey apartment building, and to the east is the community building. The central square itself is hard surfaced and has unreserved parking in these areas here and here. So the site is subject to an extant permission. So again, you can see the red line here. That provides for a 900 square metre health centre use set over 2 floors and 5 residential apartments above. And this was granted as part of the wider, as part of phase 2 of the wider development for the Kingswood development itself. As you can see, parking provision for this building was provided at the rear with access of what is now known as Kilnwood Avenue. In terms of the elevations of the extant permission, the elevations show a 3-storey building with windows on all elevations, and obviously the upper floor windows were serving the residential apartments, with the windows on the ground and first floor serving the medical centre use. Section 12 of the report in front of you provides a detailed background information associated with the use of the building and the requirements of the Section 106 associated with the outline planning permission for the wider site. In terms of the application before members tonight, well, it is tonight now virtually, isn't it? Applicant seeks permission for the erection of a 3-storey building containing 15 apartments. As you can see from the proposed layout, the building will be located at the northern end of the site with parking at the southern end. And as you will see and remember from the extant layout, it's the same arrangements as already approved on site. In terms of the floor plans, the 15 apartments will be made up of 1 bed and 14 2-beds with 5 units on each floor. This is the ground floor, this is the front of the building, this is the rear of the building, this is the 1-bed unit here, and obviously at the first and second floor they're all 2-bed units. It's important so there'll be 2 entrances, one to the front and one to the rear, because obviously the parking is to the rear, and it should be noted that a number of the apartments actually benefit from private balconies. It's important to remember that the extant consent contained 5 apartments, so this proposal represents a net increase of 10 units overall. So in terms of the proposed elevations, again, very similar to the extant permission in terms of the full gable fronted. As you can see, balconies articulate the front and rear elevations, and the important, similarly important side elevations are also articulated by these gable featured windows, which would be clad. Again, access of Kilnwood Avenue as per the extant permission. This access has already been provided and has been used obviously to access the site for compound purposes. Each of the 15 spaces will have an EV charger, and this building here will house the blue is the cycle store, which will have provision for 26 cycles, and the purple represents a bin store. So just to give you a sort of some street scene context, obviously this is the proposed building, this is the central square, this is the community building which sits on the western side of that square, and this is the co-op and residential building on the northern side. And now this is actually looking south towards the application sites. This is the proposed building. This is the adjacent residential apartment block, and this is the apartment block which sits on the eastern side of the square. Again, these are just some photos to show that context. This is the community building with the residential and car park on the far side. Again, this is a view from the centre of that square towards the car building and residential building on the northern side. This is actually looking down westwards towards actually the large recreation area, which is at this part of the wider site. This is Priory Court, which sits here. So this is on the eastern side of the square. These are properties, the 3-storey townhouses in Kilnwood Avenue. So these are these properties here. And this is a view down the side of the site. So this is the actual application site here with the fence. This is the 3-storey apartment building which sits adjacent to the application site. And these are plots 32 to 36, which sit to of Kilnwood Avenue, which are referred to in the report, which sit at the rear of the site, which are located here. Again, it's just a wider shot, so you can see obviously what the site looks like at this minute in time. It's obviously currently boarded up. You can see the unreserved parking, which has recently been put in at the front of the site here. This is plots, again referred to in your report. This is here is plots 4 and 6, Kilnwood Avenue. These 3 terrace here is 32 to 36. Existing site entrance, which will serve the car park, and obviously you can see the current state of the site, and you can also make out here there is actually a drop in levels as referred to in the site as well. So it's higher at the north and then drops down to the south. And again, this is just looking south towards the site, and these are the 3-storey townhouses in Kilnwood Avenue. So in terms of the issues, firstly, obviously it is acknowledged that significant concerns have been raised in representations regarding the loss of the health centre use on the site secured through the Section 106 agreement for the wider development. And Section 12, as I've already mentioned, of the report in front of you sets out the background to this point in detail, and I don't intend to go through all of that at this stage. I would, however, just draw your attention to a couple of things. First of all, is that the Section 106 agreement did not require the applicant to either construct the health centre or provide the land at nil cost to any interested party, nor have the applicants offered this. The applicant's offer was to build and rent on a commercial basis or sell the freehold on a commercial basis. It's also worth noting that in paragraph 12.8, which highlights the NHS Sussex are looking to increase capacity in Burgess Hill with a new site at the Brookley development being looked at and brought forward. I think the important bit is while all of this is relevant background information, the terms of the previous Section 106 agreement is a separate matter, and the application before members needs to be considered on its merits and determined in accordance with the development plan. So turning therefore to the substantive matters for consideration, it's considered that building is of an appropriate design and scale that complements the existing Kingswell development and provide the necessary enclosure to complete the square as originally intended. The local highways authority have not raised an objection to the proposal on either highway safety grounds or wider network issues. They are also content at the proposed level of parking, which is in accordance with their guidance. While the proposal would give rise to some additional impacts on residential amenity in terms of increased overlooking, loss of privacy as a result of the additional openings and balconies over the extant permission, it's not considered that the overall likely impact would be significant as to justify refusal. The proposals provide an appropriate mix of dwellings and, as set out in the report, a financial contribution towards off-site affordable housing will be secured through a Section 106 agreement, along with other infrastructure contributions in accordance with the Council's adopted SPD. The site can be satisfactorily drained, and the proposal is considered acceptable in terms of trees, dwelling space standards, accessibility and sustainable construction. The proposal would provide 10 additional units towards the Council's housing land supply in a sustainable location where there's general need for local authorities to boost the supply of housing. It is, however, recognised that proposed level of parking does not comply with policy S4 of the Burgess Hill Neighbourhood Plan, but it does comply with the West Sussex guidance, and it is not considered that level of parking would result in a highway safety hazard or other harm which would justify the refusal of the application. As already mentioned, the local highway authority have not raised an objection to the application. In regard to all the issues, it considered that the application complies with the development plan when read as a whole, and as such, your officers recommend that plan permission be granted, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr Ashdown. I just want to draw members' attention, since Mr Ashdown raised it, my name is in there, nothing to do with me. Okay. Right, we do have some speakers. Can I call Councillor David Eggleton? He is a district councillor, but today he is as a Burgess Hill Town Councillor. Thank you. You heard before, if you start talking, you've got 2 minutes, and I'll give you a reminder after 90 seconds.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Planning Committee, for giving me a little bit of time to let you know the views of the Town Council. I'm speaking to you in my capacity as Chair of the Burgess Hill Town Council Planning Committee. We recommend that you refuse this application because it is socially unsustainable for both current and future residents. It is our recommendation that from our own neighbourhood plan, core objective 3 and policy S7 will be breached by this proposal. According to the report, our most vulnerable residents will be expected to travel at least 4 miles to a potential new Brookley facility that could so easily amount to nothing, just as this one sadly may. We believe that this is so inadequate that it amounts to breaches of Design Guide DG30 and DG35. Our own aspirations as a district council, as articulated in DP7, will evaporate. And what of the poor residents who have to live in this complex? No private amenity space, that's DG46, and an inadequate number of parking spaces, which acknowledges that our own neighbourhood policy, S4, will be breached by this proposal. So more antisocial car parking is going to be the result. There are multiple near misses by the co-op every single day, and I fear there are going to be deaths in the near future. But in a broader sense, don't let this be yet another false dawn for Burgess Hill. We find ourselves with the very real prospect of no healthcare facilities of any kind east of the rail line, with 300 new properties coming down the track. We believe that the cumulative impact of decisions made here are going to result in a de facto breach of DP6, as Burgess Hill will no longer amount to a Category 1 settlement. The report makes no mention of this issue. We are already struggling to provide a comprehensive range of services for our own residents, including in health. Please refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor Eggleton. Can I call Rita Pinho, who wishes to speak against this application? Again, you've got 2 minutes. As soon as you start to speak, the clock will appear on the television screen, and after 90 seconds, I'll give you you've got 30 seconds left.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for having me here. So today we gathered to discuss a contentious issue that has stirred the frustration of many residents near the Kingsville development in Burgess Hill. This issue revolves around planning for a new block of 15 apartments. However, the proposal in question is not just about new housing, but entails a trade-off with community well-being. The town is in desperate need of a new health centre, especially in the eastern part of Burgess Hill, where approximately 1,000 new homes have been built in the past 5 years. In the face of the growing population and healthcare needs, the priority should really be on providing vital services to the community. The development contends that their efforts to establish a health centre have been fruitless, and they're not seeking an alternative use for the land. While the legal requirements or agreements, might allow for such a shift, it is vital to question whether this is the best choice for the community. Furthermore, the concerns raised by residents regarding the potential consequences of this housing development should not be dismissed. Issues such as increased traffic and parking problems and a strain on existing infrastructure are legitimate and must be considered. The well-being and safety of the community should be of paramount concern when making planning decisions. the development has outlined plans for car parking within the development. However, allocating only one parking space per flat is a formula for future parking challenges. It not only disregards the reality of modern households where many families own multiple cars, but also can exacerbate existing issues with unsafe amount of traffic and dangerous parking. Sorry. It is crucial to address potential consequences, especially in terms of traffic. So let me just pose a few questions. So in the event of parking problems and traffic congestion, who should be held accountable for finding practical solutions? And have we thoroughly assessed the potential impact of the development on emergency response times? We'll take responsibility of emergency services, for example, in the harm of the residents. In conclusion, while development is essential, obviously, for a growing community, it should not come at the expense of the community's
Could you sum up in one sentence, please?
well-being, vital services and practical concerns. Striking a balance between development and community welfare is of paramount importance to ensuring a sustainable future for all. Thank you very much, everyone.
Can I call Mike Holmes of KLW Associates Planner for any speaking in support of this application? Again, when you start speaking, the clock will start to tick down.
Good evening, Chairman and members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. The applicant, Crowdhouse Homes, and our practice have been involved in the redevelopment of the Kima Tiles worksite from the very beginning, and we are proud to have been part of the team that has worked with this council and Burgess Hill Town Council to deliver the highest quality scheme, integrating the new homes with the community centre, open space, and the shop that stand on the wider site today. Part of the wider redevelopment of the site was the provision of a health centre, and it is genuinely regrettable to us and the applicant that it has not been possible to deliver this. The planning application submission in the officer's report to committee details the steps that the applicant has taken to ensure they have done everything they can to make this happen. Indeed, the applicant has been committed to and worked extremely hard to deliver the health centre since early 2016. Ultimately, the health centre has not come forward due to a lack of commitment to provide funding to the health centre by the local clinical commissioning group. Unfortunately, these are circumstances that are out of the control of the council and the local general practice surgery, who had been engaged in discussions to occupy the health centre throughout the process. It became evident in late 2022, after 6.5 years, that the delivery of the health centre was simply not going to be possible. However, it was not for the want of trying. Given the history and the sheer effort to make the health centre sure the health centre was delivered, together with appropriate marketing of the site, the relevant clauses of the legal agreement relating to the delivery of the health centre have been met. This means the applicant is now free to seek an alternative development to the site, hence the application before committee today. The applicant is fully committed to producing a Section 106 agreement making payments requested by the council, including those towards affordable housing, education and libraries. We fully understand and have sympathy with the sensitivities around this application, but the applicant has pushed and pressed for over 6 years in a genuine effort to deliver the health centre. Given the circumstances, I would ask members to support your officer's recommendation to grant permission for the application before you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of this application. I'm the Group Design Manager at Crowdhouse Homes. Crowdhouse Homes are extremely proud of the neighbourhood and community we have built at Kilnwood over the last 7 years. We believe it to be one of the best new developments Burgess Hill has seen in recent years, and part of this success is the provision of community facilities delivered by Crowdhouse in the form of the community centre, the co-op convenience shop and the fantastic open space including play areas, sports areas, recreation areas and the artwork. We are therefore disappointed that an occupier for the health centre has not come forward to complete the development. As can be seen from the officer's report and submitted information, Crowdhouse have gone to great extents to try and find an occupier, exploring different delivery mechanisms, discussing the proposals with various delivery partners, government and regional bodies and local politicians. Unfortunately, none of these discussions amounted to a solution for the delivery of the health centre. and as per the terms of the 2010 legal agreement, and it is unlikely this scenario will change in the future. Your officer has highlighted that at the Brookley development, the developers are gifting the provision of a built healthcare facility. However, it is worth noting that this is not a gift, it is an obligation of that legal agreement. Such a provision was not included in the 2010 legal agreement for Kilnwood, and had it been, it would have informed the financial model that we used to establish the value of the land that we paid to purchase the overall site from Kima Tiles. It is for this reason we are not able to offer the health centre on such a basis. Given all I've said, we therefore feel it is important that this area of development is not left unoccupied. The whole premise of the original design for the central square was for it to be contained on all four sides by high quality buildings, and to not fulfil this would be a permanent scar on the development. The proposal before you seek to meet the original design objectives whilst providing much needed housing in a sustainable location, and therefore we respectfully request that the members accept the officer recommendation and resolve to grant this application. Thank you for your time.
Sorry, I don't know how long that was because the timer wasn't working.
2 minutes, apparently.
It was 2 minutes, oh great. But anyway, I read your thing, so it sounded about right. Okay, and I'm now going to call Councillor Christine Cherry, who's the ward councillor for this area. In light of the same was happened with Councillor Peacock, Councillor Cherry doesn't get timed, but she is acutely unaware, I hope that's not what you're going to say, acutely aware not to try the patience of the committee. Councillor Cherry, when you get there.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and good afternoon, everybody. I first want to say that the views I'm going to make in my statement are formed by my own conversations with various parties. But when I first became district councillor last May, and I became aware of the plight of the proposed health centre at Kilnwood, I decided to take on a fact-finding mission to investigate the repurposing of the proposed health centre into 15 flats. My investigations took me to discussions and face-to-face meetings with both the developer, Crudace, and NHS Sussex. Plus, I also had discussions with the chair of the patient liaison group at the Silverdale practice. The overwhelming conclusion I came to was that the S106 agreement, signed back in 2010, was weak. It became clear to me that the real problem was the prioritisation of the 106 funds paid by the developer to cover the costs of the extensive infrastructure on the development. It would appear that rather than providing cash or assets for the primary care facility, someone, presumably at Mid Sussex District Council at the time, or possibly both parties, decided to simply reserve the site and use a mix of health designated S106 monies coming from the Croft housing development across the road and NHS funding to finance the building of the health centre. In turn, this would appear to make the original S106 monies go further in financing the rest of the infrastructure on the site, which was extensive. In turn, back in 2010, and remember, this was a very different financial world then, this solution would probably seem viable. Fast forward to 2020, and everything changed. The three local clinical commissioning groups merged into one and formed the Integrated Care Board, which covers all of Sussex and is usually referred to as NHS Sussex. They, in turn, were not happy with the deal which had been negotiated with the former CCG and the Silverdale practice, and subsequently withdrew the prospect of funding. With the loss of this financial support from the NHS for the health centre, the S106 monies from the Croft was redirected to the proposed medical centre due to be built at Brookley. Thus, these events left the proposed health centre at King's Weald totally unfunded. The circumstances I've outlined, of course, provide very little comfort for the many residents of King's Weald who were promised in their sales brochure a medical centre when they bought their homes. The medical centre was an attractive proposition, particularly for the elderly, the disabled and families with young children. The large number of letters received from residents challenging what to them was an unacceptable change of use are often heartbreaking to read. Indeed, over 1/3 of households in King's Weald wrote in to express their dismay and disappointment at the current situation. Indeed, both my fellow councillors from Burgess Hill and I share these tremendous feelings of disappointment and have a genuine concern regarding the shortage of medical facilities in the eastern part of Burgess Hill, which is continuing to be developed at pace. It is deeply concerning to learn that the NHS had no target numbers for GPs per head of population. Indeed, I understand that West Sussex is in the bottom 3 in the National League of GPs per head of population. And recent data released by the NHS shows that of the 5 GP surgeries with the worst waiting times across the country, 3 are in Sussex. In my view, the lesson learned from this lamentable situation is that the local provision of new healthcare facilities must be given, I put here a much higher, but I think a first priority when negotiating S106 agreements with developers in the future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Cherry. Very emotional, heartfelt, and if I'd been there, I would have said exactly the same. Because I recall this, and the whole premise of this development, part of it was health provision. But, and there's a big but, as always, we can't force the NHS to build. So, you've heard what you say. We are only here not to rewrite the Section 106. We all regret the loss of the NHS provision, could have been on this site. We're here to decide the application in front of us is the application of appropriate size, scale and mass for this area. And we have no reasons to suggest otherwise, because it wouldn't have been recommended for approval. And I've got Councillor Sweatman wishing to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's always very regrettable that, that there's not a health centre being taken up on this site. But it's clear from the report, and this is what we're only looking at, what's in front of us today. It's good to have the background, but it's not a decision we're going to make on that. The fact is that from here, the Crowdace, the developers, have made every effort, and there's a history in here dealing with the clinical commissioning groups, etc., to try and do everything they possibly can to have a health centre there. That has failed. So, but if we read on 8.4, one of the agreement allows for the use of the site for any purpose subject to necessary consents being secured. So that allows for this application for the flats to be built. That's part of the agreement. It can be used for any other purpose or any purpose. Well, I think the developers, given their due, have tried very hard to facilitate this facility, and it's very unfortunate that the residents have go to the site at Brookley, which has been offered to them. Thank you, Chairman.
Right. Councillor Moore, who those who may remember Councillor Moore, should be turning in her grave because she was adamant as a leader of Burgess Hill Town Council when this went through. There should be a health centre east of the railway line, and sadly, try as they might, NHS England have changed their model, and they now want things built for them, and the site popcorn rent. But that's, as Councillor Cherry quite rightly said, 2010 was a different financial time. This is 2023. Councillor Hitchcock.
I thank Councillor Cherry for the information she has given us. It seems to me that the CCG and the local practices couldn't make their mind up what they wanted, and there were options available elsewhere, but they were paper options. This was a positive option, which had been put forward on a rent or sale on basis, and it's not been taken up. I find it incredible that a development like that cannot have a health facility on it. I think that's amazing, and it's something that this council perhaps needs to look at in depth, and I will probably take that to scrutiny committee. As it stands, Crowdhouse have made an exceptional effort to try and get this development placed, and they failed. They have, in the clause that's written, the opportunity to do something else, and here it is in front of us. So we just have to decide whether this fits with the rest of the development and whether it is a sensible building to put in that space, okay? From my point of view, it's overlooking the public space, okay? It's not overlooking somebody's property, and on the south side, it's overlooking the car park, and then there is a gap to properties which are south of it. It's 3 floors. There are many other 3-floor developments in that area, having had a look. I think in terms of the use of that space, now it cannot be a health centre. It's a reasonable effort on their part to put that forward. I've got 1 or 2 little design issues which I just need the officer to clear up. I'm not a lover of balconies in dense areas, and I'm just looking at the picture there. The actual balconies are on the north and south side of the building, am I correct? Correct. And they're overlooking the open space and the car park behind. Yeah. So I'm happy with that. But in general principle, I don't like balconies in dense areas. So I think we're in a position whereby Crowdhouse have got every right to put forward a proposal. Okay, we have a situation where we've lost a potential health centre. Is this building adequate as a replacement on that space? My view is it is. And I'm going to go with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hitchcock. Well, your parish, Councillor Kinsella's ward, you have a similar type of issue in Copthorne, which I understand is coming to a head. Having conversations with Mr. Ashdown, and they've got to make a decision of a similar nature when it comes in, you said by December, you said, wasn't it? Hopefully.
Yeah, that's where the Section 106 currently lies in terms of the trigger for the option.
So unfortunately, we've got you have issues in your parish and Councillor Casella's ward. It's not good. It's definitely not good, and somewhere the model's got to be looked at again. Anyway, Councillor Kenny did beat you to it, so I'm going to go to Councillor Kenny.
Hi, yeah, just a couple of quick comments. First of all, thanks very much for an excellent presentation. It's clear to me that the officers and the Crowdhouse have done the best that they can in the situation. Like everyone else, I chafe against the situation that we're in, and I'm looking for where in the room standing up for their responsibilities and their decisions are the people who have brought us to this pass, specifically NHS Sussex. So I'd like some advice from the chair and from Steve, if you could give it. What's in my mind is to, without rejecting the proposal, to send an absolutely clear message that this is totally unacceptable. And I would suggest something like either an adjournment or a temporary deferment wherein we ask for the plan from NHS Sussex how they intend to provide primary care to the eastern side of Burgess Hill. The conversations that I've had with people around who know about, for example, the Silverdale surgery, who intend to move, hook, line and sinker, to the new site. If you try to walk that, it's about 50 minutes. Yeah, not everybody can just jump in a car and drive there. And guess what? That new facility is likely to be within about 5 minutes walk of an existing Burgess Hill surgery, the Meadows surgery. It's utterly preposterous planning. We'll end up with all of the surgeries on the western side of the town. So I don't know if there's room to do that, to ask for an adjournment in which, and I don't know whether we have the right to demand it of them, but it's a relevant piece of information. They are statutory consultees. They should be making a statement. They have made no further statement than their original one. So they haven't said anything since the health centre fell through. So I'd be interested in your guidance whether we can put forward something like that.
Okay, I don't think we can, for starters, but I think Councillor Hitchcock hit the nail on the head. I think we can call NHS to the scrutiny committee, and that be the suitable place to unleash your difference of opinion that they come to. Basically, their model is now they like to have a purpose-built building. They will kit it out, but they don't want to build it, and they don't want to pay anything more than a peppercorn rent, and a peppercorn rent will probably be £1 a year.
Indeed.
That's the way they want to do it. Unfortunately, after 5.5, well, actually it's longer than that, it's nearly 7 years worth of negotiations. I think Crowdays has done remarkably well. You won't hear this fall out of my mouth very often, but they've done remarkably well.
I share that. It's not
to try
and
get NHS to.
Can I make a couple of other points though?
Yeah, of course you can.
I looked on NHS Sussex's, website today. Their responsibility is to manage the collection of GP surgeries to provide. So they should have a view towards the geographical pattern and how people access those primary care services. So, yeah, I'm happy to be guided. That's why I asked for the guidance. If it's scrutiny committee is the place that it needs to happen, but they cannot be left in any doubt about this. And also, there's the element of the fact that the practices themselves are private commercial organisations. Why wouldn't you take a provided facility from Homes England if you're going to have to pay for one and manage it within your private practice? So it's not a direct challenge to them on their, to say that they're wrong, but clearly we're constrained by the business models of the NHS and of the GP practice, and it's not good for residents. Anyway, that's it.
I think you'll find everybody in this room would totally agree with you from all cases on that one. It is a deplorable situation, and as Councillor Sweatman said, regrettable, lamentable, whatever word you want to choose, that half the Burgess Hill won't have a GP that they could go to easily. It's just unfortunate that, and I think Councillor Hitchcock was quite right. This is not the committee to drag NHS to. The scrutiny is to do it, and they will be, I can guarantee, seriously grilled. And anybody who sits in this committee does have the right to go to that scrutiny committee and let rip, because I do think that's the right place to do it. Councillor Kinsella, as I did mention you.
Yes, thank you. You actually beat me to it before. Yes, it's almost a mirror image of Heathy Wood, where the doctors were going to build an extra medical centre on there. But in the time it's taken and arguments and disputes over different things, the cost of the development has gone from 1.5 million to 4 million. And the doctors just can't afford to do it. And the NHS and the CCG won't support them at all. So the chances are now that is another medical centre that won't happen. We have a lot of irate residents on that estate who are also promised a school, which chances are that won't happen either. So, but it's a bottom line is, yes, we'd like to have these medical centres, but if no one's going to pay for them, we're stuck.
And again, I think that's the reason why I think that you would support Councillor Hitchcock and getting them to appear in front of a scrutiny committee, because I do think that's the place.
Yeah.
It's not the planning, even though we all feel that strong, but we cannot refuse this or defer this under the lack of the NHS provision. It's purely on what we see, and Councillor Hitchcock has hit it nail on the head. Balconies, they're not overlooking directly into anybody's house. They're looking over the open space to the north and the open space to the south. So I think in reality, it looks very much like what we've got around there. Yeah. And that's what you've got to base your decision on now. Hopefully this will be the last one. Councillor Henwood.
Yeah, I agree with you for planning. It's no reason to refuse. But I would like to point out that I hope Mid Sussex District Council take on board legal obligations for Section 106 in the future, that they will be committed to medical facilities, as Councillor Cherry has suggested. It wasn't just the NHS that fell down in this case, because Crodace, all they did was just provide a slab. They didn't provide any kind of building as such. So Mid Sussex District Council also have a responsibility for this. Anyway, I agree with this. We cannot refuse this. But if I could just point out, I was advised I could mention something about the condition.
You can do.
Is that
yes,
appropriate
it's very
that I
right.
do that now?
I was going to ask you about it. Do you want to mention that bit?
Yeah, I won't forget. I wouldn't have forgotten. On the paragraph 12.73.
It's on the update sheet.
In our update
members.
sheet, it mentions about local community infrastructure and contribution to be spent towards improved facilities. Please, can that be directed towards St. John's Park? There is a master plan for St. John's Park. It came out in 2020. So could I please ask for that contribution to go towards the master plan park for St. John's? Thank you, Chairman. And not the pavilion.
And I think the answer you got from Mr.
He'll follow it up.
He was going to follow
Thank
that
you.
up. Now, they also, I think, Paula, you do the Section 106 now. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair. I'm just quickly looking to see if we've already got it in the draft, because at the moment we do have a draft that's circulating.
So again, we've taken on board everything that everybody said, and it was what it was then. Unfortunately, it's taken 13 years to get to this stage. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I had a couple of legal points, really. I'd like an answer from our legal officer, if possible, and that is just following up.
Yeah, we will put that. Could you write something to the? Is it your application to the monitoring officer, or would you want me to?
We'll catch up around it.
We'll catch up.
If you're saying the committee demands that it goes to the scrutiny work programme, that would be better.
Okay, I'll do that. We'll come up with some words tomorrow, if that's okay. And we're with your recommendation and Councillor Kenny's, myself and Mr. Ashdown will come up with some words to get that fast track to scrutiny. Yep.
Just going to touch on the point about the deferral. Right? It wouldn't be appropriate. You need to consider what's in front of you in terms of the planning application. I appreciate all of the comments that have been made around the Section 106 and NHS provision, but ultimately that's not material to the determination of the application in front of you. It's a separate issue. So you just need to focus on what's in front of you and take a decision on the recommendation tonight.
Okay. Now you know what the recommendation is. It's to approve, subject to. Can I have a proposer? Councillor Hitchcock and Councillor Sweatman as the seconder. Is that correct? Right. Can we now go to the vote, please? Green, if you approve. We may not like it, but I don't think we've got any choice in the matter. I need one more person to vote. Please don't let that be me. Okay, right, we've got nine in support of it and 2 abstain and 1, we're missing 1 because councillor Cherry's there. It's over there. Okay, so that has been approved. Okay, now moving on to my agenda. Item 7, questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2, due notice has been given. I have none. So therefore, according to that clock, I will close the meeting at 6:26-ish. Can everybody stay in place? Because we still got...